The Galactic Empire had never issued a declaration of war it could not enforce. For over 30,000 standard cycles, its proclamations were less threats and more announcements of an ending already decided. Entire civilizations had learned that the moment the Empire spoke their name in a formal broadcast, history would soon speak of them in the past tense. Stars changed flags. Species vanished into archives. Resistance was catalogued, studied, and erased with academic efficiency. So when the Empire finally turned its attention toward humanity, it did so with the same bored certainty. The transmission was broadcast across every human-controlled system at once, translated flawlessly into hundreds of languages, its tone precise and ceremonial. Humanity was accused of uncontrolled expansion, inefficient governance, and statistical inevitability of rebellion. The conclusion followed with chilling politeness. Compliance would be brief. Non-compliance would be shorter. Across the Galactic Empire, there was no debate about the outcome. Human space was small by imperial standards, scattered, noisy, and young. Their ships relied on brute force engineering rather than elegant energy manipulation. Their political structures were fragmented. Their species had been spacefaring for barely a blink of galactic time. The Empire had crushed older, stronger, and more unified powers without ever mobilizing its full strength. This was not a war. It was an administrative action. Imperial analysts predicted three likely responses: panic-driven surrender, internal collapse before first contact, or symbolic resistance followed by extinction. None of the projections required more than a fraction of a single armada. The fleets assigned to the campaign were chosen less for necessity and more for tradition. Conquest deserved witnesses, after all. Humanity, however, did not respond. There were no emergency broadcasts. No pleas sent to neutral powers. No mass evacuations detected. Human communication traffic remained steady, almost dull. Civilian networks showed no spike in distress indicators. Military channels did not light up with mobilization chatter. From the outside, it looked like paralysis. From the Empire's perspective, it was confirmation of inferiority. Fear often masqueraded as silence. As Imperial fleets crossed the boundary into contested space, their commanders transmitted standard intimidation signals, visual demonstrations of firepower designed to shatter morale before the first shot was fired. Stars briefly dimmed under controlled energy discharges. Entire moons were outlined in targeting grids. The message was clear and universally understood. Still, humanity said nothing. Within Imperial command circles, mild irritation replaced indifference. Silence was acceptable before a declaration. Afterward, it was inefficient. The Empire valued order, even in annihilation. Additional transmissions were sent, clarifying timelines, outlining surrender protocols, and offering limited preservation of cultural data as a courtesy. The offers went unanswered. What the Empire did not consider was that humanity had heard declarations like this before. Not from empires so large, perhaps, but from powers equally certain of their dominance. Humanity had learned, long ago, that loud defiance invited escalation, and pleading only hastened it. Silence, on the other hand, bought time. Time to measure. Time to verify. Time to decide whether a response was even necessary. As the armadas advanced unopposed, confidence hardened into complacency. The Empire's final pre-engagement report labeled humanity non-reactive. The word carried an unspoken assumption: whatever humans were, they were not dangerous. No empire that feared extinction stayed quiet in the face of it. The declaration concluded, as all imperial declarations did, with the promise. Resistance would be met with total removal. The Empire believed this was the moment history tilted in its favor. Humanity let the broadcast end. Then, somewhere far from any battlefield, a confirmation light waited patiently, unchanged, exactly as it had been designed to do. To the Empire, the war had already begun. To humanity, it had not. Declarations were noise. Outcomes were what mattered. And until every variable was known, until every assumption was tested, no human response would exist for the galaxy to misunderstand. That restraint, unseen and unannounced, was the first warning given. Humanity's calm was not ignorance, it was experience purchased at a brutal price. Long before the Galactic Empire noticed them, humans had learned what the universe did to the unprepared. Their first steps beyond their cradle were not triumphant. Early colonies failed. First contact optimism ended in burned settlements, broken treaties, and evacuation orders transmitted too late to matter. Humanity survived not because it was strong, but because it learned faster than it mourned. Those losses rewired how humans thought about survival. Expansion stopped being a race and became a calculation. Every colony was built to be abandoned. Every population was taught how to disappear, rebuild, and continue elsewhere. Records were duplicated across systems. Leadership was distributed, temporary, and replaceable. The galaxy mistook this lack of central spectacle for weakness, never realizing there was nothing singular left to destroy. Where other species pursued dominance, humanity pursued resilience. They mapped failure with obsessive precision. Wars, pandemics, ecological collapses, and near-extinction events became data sets instead of taboos. Human children grew up studying worst-case scenarios the way others studied mythology. Fear was acknowledged, then engineered around. Hope was not assumed, it was constructed piece by piece. Military doctrine followed the same philosophy. Humans stopped believing in decisive victories and started preparing for endless survival. Fleets were not symbols of pride but tools of delay. Defensive lines were designed to fall back, not hold. The goal was never to win quickly, only to ensure that no loss could ever be final. If something could be destroyed, it was redesigned until its destruction no longer mattered. This mindset shaped how humans treated power. Anything capable of ending a conflict permanently was treated with suspicion, sealed behind layers of authorization, and forgotten unless absolutely required. Human history was crowded with examples of solutions that solved one problem by creating something worse. Restraint became instinct. Silence became policy. So when the Galactic Empire declared war, humanity did not freeze. It assessed. The declaration was compared against archived threats, predictive models, and historical parallels stretching back centuries. Imperial language was dissected not for intimidation, but for intent. Fleet movements were tracked. Assumptions were stress-tested. Humanity did not ask whether it could win. It asked what survival would look like afterward. The galaxy never learned this history because humanity never advertised it. There were no monuments to extinction avoided, no broadcasts celebrating restraint. Survival was not a story humans told others, it was a habit they practiced quietly. By the time the Empire finished explaining why humanity could not endure, humans had already finished deciding whether endurance was even necessary. That decision process was unemotional by design. Human councils were trained to remove pride, anger, and fear from existential choices. Emotional responses belonged to memorials, not strategy. When extinction appeared on the table, humans did not debate honor. They examined probability, cost, reversibility, and long-term consequences. Every option was evaluated not for morality, but for survivability. That habit unnerved allies and confused enemies, because it produced reactions that felt disturbingly calm. Generations earlier, humans had learned that the universe rewarded preparation, not courage. Courage burned brightly and briefly. Preparation endured. Entire institutions existed solely to imagine futures no one wanted and then make them survivable. Engineers, sociologists, historians, and ethicists worked together to design responses that could be activated without debate. Once built, those responses were hidden from culture, stripped of symbolism, and denied myth. They were not weapons, not warnings, and not threats. They were procedures. By the time the Empire arrived, humanity had already survived itself. Ideologies had collapsed. Nations had dissolved. Technology had nearly ended them more than once. Each time, humans adapted, simplified, and continued. The declaration of war was processed like any other existential input. It was neither shocking nor unique. It was simply another scenario requiring confirmation before action. Nothing more. nothing less. That truth waited patiently, unchanged, while the galaxy misunderstood everything. By the time the Imperial fleets crossed the last neutral markers, humanity had already finished its arguments. There were no speeches, no raised voices, no competing visions of pride or revenge. Verification replaced debate. Signals were checked, then checked again. Sensor data was compared against archived projections built generations earlier for threats classified as terminal. When the numbers aligned, the room went quiet, not with fear, but with completion. The system they reviewed was never called a weapon. Human language had deliberately stripped it of drama. It had no name that could be chanted, no designation meant to inspire awe. It existed as a contingency, buried beneath treaties, redundancies, and ethical locks. Its purpose was not victory. It was resolution. Designed only for scenarios where continued existence could not be negotiated, it sat untouched for decades, accumulating dust rather than legend. Humanity had built it after discovering something unsettling about the universe. Not energy, not faster propulsion, not superior firepower. They had discovered that reality itself relied on continuity. Causality, once disrupted at the right depth, did not resist. It complied. Entire chains of events could be unstitched without violence, leaving no debris, no radiation, no echoes. Just absence, clean and irreversible. Because of what it could do, the system was isolated from command culture. No single person could access it. No crisis protocol allowed urgency to bypass consensus. Even now, activation required confirmation from distributed authorities who never spoke to one another directly. The process was intentionally slow, forcing certainty to replace impulse. Humanity feared this system more than any enemy, and that fear had shaped every safeguard around it. As Imperial ships advanced, their confidence unreadable to those monitoring them, the final confirmation arrived. The Empire's strategic assumptions matched the archived profile exactly. Expansionist. Absolutist. Unwilling to accept coexistence. The probability of negotiated survival dropped below the threshold set centuries earlier. That number, once crossed, removed opinion from the equation. The command interface did not dramatize the moment. There was no countdown, no flashing alert, no warning sound. A single prompt appeared, asking only for verification that all alternatives had been exhausted. It did not ask if the choice was right. Humanity had learned long ago that certainty was rarer than righteousness. When the last confirmation arrived, the prompt disappeared. Somewhere beyond observation, the system engaged. No energy surge rippled through space. No alarms triggered. Physics did not scream in protest. The universe did what it always did when confronted with a rule it could not contradict. It adjusted. Threads rewove themselves. Paths that had led toward humanity quietly ceased to exist. On Imperial sensors, nothing changed at first. Fleets remained on course. Signals transmitted as planned. Then, without warning, data stopped arriving. Not jammed. Not scrambled. Simply absent. Ships that should have been there were no longer represented in any frame of reference. They had not exploded. They had not retreated. They had never arrived. Humanity did not celebrate. There was no relief, no triumph, no sense of dominance. The confirmation light went dark, exactly as designed, and the system sealed itself again, unreachable and undocumented. For humans, the act carried no glory. It was a procedure executed to its conclusion, nothing more. The button had not been pressed in anger or desperation. It had been pressed because the universe left no other option. Records were updated automatically, stripped of narrative and emotion, filed alongside countless other contingencies humanity hoped would never be referenced again. No memorial was planned, because nothing had visibly ended. No victory notice was issued, because nothing had been won. Humanity returned to observation, waiting to see how a galaxy built on assumptions would react when one of them simply ceased to apply. The silence that followed was not emptiness, but expectation, heavy with consequences that had yet to unfold across civilizations unprepared to question their understanding of existence itself and survival forever. Confusion spread through the Galactic Empire faster than any alarm ever had. The first reports were dismissed as sensor faults, minor desynchronizations expected during long-range operations. Command nodes requested recalibration. Engineers ran diagnostics. Nothing appeared broken, yet something fundamental was missing. Entire task forces had stopped reporting simultaneously across multiple vectors, not at the edges of engagement, but deep within what should have been uncontested space. Imperial doctrine assumed destruction left evidence. Wreckage, energy signatures, debris fields, radiation scars. None existed. Navigation charts showed empty corridors where armadas should have been advancing. Communication logs contained outgoing messages that never received replies, as if the recipients had slipped between moments. The Empire had erased civilizations before, but this was different. This was not loss. This was erasure without impact. As analysts dug deeper, panic replaced skepticism. Historical records began failing consistency checks. Supply chains referenced fleets that no longer existed. Command hierarchies listed admirals with no traceable origin. Even memorial archives returned no results, as though the species now missing had never contributed to history at all. The Empire's greatest strength, its meticulous record-keeping, turned against it, exposing holes that logic could not patch. Scientific councils convened in emergency session. Hypotheses collapsed one by one. No known weapon produced absence without transformation. Matter could be destroyed, energy dissipated, space-time distorted, but nothing explained removal without consequence. The Empire had conquered physics itself in past wars, bending forces to its will, yet here physics offered no protest, no anomaly, no resistance. It behaved as if nothing unusual had occurred. Then came the realization that fractured imperial confidence. The disappearance was not localized. It was selective. Only assets committed to the human campaign were gone. No collateral effects reached neighboring systems. No stars dimmed. No orbits destabilized. Whatever had happened understood intent. It did not rage outward. It corrected inward. Fear entered the Empire not as emotion, but as calculation. If such a mechanism existed, escalation became meaningless. There could be no counterstrike against something that left no target. No deterrence against a power that required no presence. The Empire had built its identity on inevitability. Now inevitability had failed. Whispers spread between species that had once bowed unquestioningly. Expansion fleets halted mid-transit. Border skirmishes froze. Ancient rivals stared at each other across battle lines, suddenly unsure whether conflict itself was still permissible. The assumption that size guaranteed survival collapsed overnight. Power was no longer measured by how much one could destroy, but by how completely one could remove. In that silence, humanity finally spoke. The message carried no triumph, no threat, no justification. It did not explain mechanisms or principles. It did not name what had been done or how. It acknowledged the disappearance without celebrating it, framing it as an outcome humanity had hoped to avoid. The tone was calm, almost weary, as though addressing a misunderstanding rather than issuing a warning. Humanity stated it did not seek dominion, territory, or submission. It declared no interest in rewriting galactic order. The action taken was described only as a response to non-negotiable extinction. It would not be repeated, not because humanity lacked the ability, but because repeating it would damage something larger than victory. The message ended with a simple condition: coexistence required restraint on all sides. The Empire listened. For the first time in its history, it revised doctrine not after defeat, but after absence. Expansion charters were suspended. New laws replaced ancient mandates. The concept of total war was quietly removed from strategic texts, not banned, but rendered obsolete. Humanity had not defeated the Empire in battle. It had demonstrated a boundary the universe itself appeared to respect. Across the galaxy, civilizations adjusted their ambitions. Humanity became a reference point, not an enemy. A reminder that some powers did not announce themselves until misunderstanding made demonstration unavoidable. And long after fleets withdrew and borders stabilized, the greatest legacy remained invisible. The knowledge that somewhere, beyond spectacle and threat, restraint existed as a force stronger than conquest, waiting patiently, hoping never to be required again. In the cycles that followed, the galaxy reorganized itself around a truth no one had planned for. Expansion slowed everywhere, not because of treaties or threats, but because certainty had vanished. Empires that once measured success in systems claimed began measuring survival and risks avoided. Borders hardened, not in preparation for war, but to prevent misunderstandings that could no longer be afforded. Humanity did not enforce this shift. It simply existed at the center of it. The Galactic Empire formally rescinded its declaration without ceremony. No apology was issued, because none could be justified by precedent. Instead, new language entered official records, carefully neutral, acknowledging a miscalculation of scope. Humanity was reclassified, not as a rival, but as a stabilizing variable. The term unsettled those who relied on hierarchy, yet it spread quickly. Stability had become more valuable than dominance. Humanity declined invitations to lead councils, command alliances, or arbitrate disputes. It accepted only limited observer status, sharing nothing that resembled authority. This restraint confused civilizations accustomed to conquest following power. Humans explained nothing beyond a single principle repeated consistently: survival did not require control. The galaxy, uncertain and wary, accepted this answer because no alternative felt safer. Trade routes reopened cautiously. Diplomatic channels multiplied. Species that had once hidden from the Empire now revealed themselves, testing whether coexistence was truly possible. Humanity responded with predictability, not generosity. Agreements were precise. Boundaries were explicit. Violations were documented, not punished. Every interaction reinforced the same message without stating it outright. Escalation would never be the first response, but it would also never be misunderstood. Within human space, nothing changed visibly. There were no celebrations, no monuments, no cultural retelling of what had occurred. The event entered records as a resolved contingency, archived alongside disasters averted and systems corrected. Humanity had learned that myth-making distorted judgment. What mattered was not what had been done, but that it would not need to be done again. Over time, the phrase, human deterrence, appeared in academic circles, stripped of fear and awe, treated as a structural phenomenon rather than a threat. Analysts concluded that humanity's greatest strength was not the mechanism it possessed, but its unwillingness to rely on it. The button existed, and that was enough. Its silence carried more weight than any demonstration ever could. Generations later, new civilizations would ask why humanity never expanded beyond certain limits, why it refused to dominate regions left vulnerable after imperial withdrawal. The answer remained unchanged. Expansion created obligations. Obligations invited conflict. Conflict forced choices humanity preferred never to face again. Survival, in their view, was not about winning the future, but preserving the option to have one. The Galactic Empire endured, altered but intact. Other powers followed its example, revising doctrines that had once seemed eternal. Total war became a theoretical concept, studied but never planned. The galaxy grew quieter, not peaceful, but careful. Every species understood now that some lines, once crossed, did not lead to retaliation, but to absence. Humanity remained where it had always been, neither ruler nor guardian, but reference. A civilization that had looked into extinction often enough to stop dramatizing it. They had not saved the galaxy, and they did not claim to have. They had simply refused to let certainty dictate outcome. The button remained sealed, undocumented, and unspoken of, exactly as intended. Its existence reshaped everything without being touched again. That was the final lesson humanity offered, without instruction or demand. Power used once could end a war. Power restrained indefinitely could end the need for one.